Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. The Trumpster is out of the hospital, back in the White House, and in what is the most defiantly Trump move possible, rips the mask right off before he walks into the residence. Walked up the stairs, and look, I give him credit, a sign of strength. You have to do that on a certain level for international reasons. But before he went in, it was a giant screw you, took off the mask, and then walked in. And my first thought was, if I work in the White House, do I come to work tomorrow? Do I really want to be around somebody who clearly doesn't get it? Now, interestingly enough, new poll out, 2/3 of Americans believe that Trump has handled the coronavirus irresponsibly when it comes to himself and to the people around him. And you go, duh. Yeah, only 2/3. Pretty surprising about that. But 2/3. And, in one single moment, he proved how irresponsible he is. He could have sent a message. Because, look, everything the president does, it doesn't matter who it is going to be micro-scrutinized. You're going to look at it and you're going to scrutinize it because this is the leader of the free world. This is the leader of the nation. And, everything that he's done around this issue has been the wrong choice for us. Now, for himself, this was all about politics. And I said from the beginning, I don't know that I necessarily believe that he has it. But, they're saying he does, so okay. My other thought is this is what happens when you have the world's best healthcare at your beck and call. But it also got me thinking of, how polarized are we as a country? Where, there are some in the country who goes, he's the greatest leader in the world. He's fabulous. Oh, I'm so sad. And then half the country who just doesn't believe it because he's lied to us so often. He's pulled the bait and switch so often. And then you see over the weekend, he does the little joyride around Bethesda, which, again, another one of these polarizing moments. The people who are Trump supporters go, see, he's a strong leader. He's going to go out among the people. And then, there are people on the other side going, what a stupid move. What kind of political theater nonsense is this? Do you know how many people you put at risk for this? And it's not just people like me saying this. You had an attending physician at Walter Reed Hospital who tweeted out that, quote, that presidential SUV is not only bulletproof, it's hermetically sealed against chemical attacks. The risk of COVID-19 transmission inside is as high as it gets outside a medical procedures. He says, the irresponsibility is astounding. My thoughts are with the Secret Service. With the Secret Service forced to play. He goes on to tweet, every single person in the vehicle during that completely unnecessary presidential drive-by now has to be quarantined for 14 days. They might get sick. They may die for political theater commanded by Trump to put their lives at risk for theater. This is insanity. And it is. It's clearly insanity. And when you look at the sad reality, you go, why would you put these people at risk like that? Now, the right will tell you, well, Rick, those agents had proper protective equipment on. They had PPE. They had a mask and gloves. And the president was wearing a mask for one of the, few times. So they're perfectly protected. No, they're not. That's unnecessary. But again, it's all about the political theater. And it's all about Trump. And understand, he's going to make this, he's now dominating the news cycle again. Now, I find it interesting that, again, on the polarized side, you had Matt Gaetz, who said that, Trump won't have to recover from COVID. COVID will have to recover from President Trump. You go, okay. I think the best response I saw to that was, you're such a dork. Which I thought was a great response. Just let it go. But here's the thing. This is the weird thing. Now Trump understands. we're several months into this, 210,000 people dead, millions of people infected. He's got it. He's got it. He went to school. Evidently, getting sick and going to the hospital to him is like going to school, but he went to school. He now knows. He knows what it's going to take. He knows what it's going to take to defeat this. He has now developed a sufficient understanding of the pandemic, and he's going to deal with it. And weirdly enough, and I talked about this on Friday a little bit, that he's gonna walk out on Monday, and this was always my thought on how this was gonna play out. He's gonna walk out on Monday and he's gonna say, I dealt with it. It's not a big deal. We can move on. We don't have to close anything. We can reopen. Hey, if I did it, anyone can. We can power through this. And this has always been the right wing, tough guy mentality. That we'll go right through it. So expect that more on Fox today. They actually had one of the campaign flacks come out and say that now Donald Trump is going to win over the COVID vote. All those people that got the virus and all those people who've got loved ones who have died from it because of his incompetence, they're now going to swing to his side because he's had it. He now understands. He sympathizes with him. And I heard the word sympathize and Donald Trump in the same sentence. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. He sympathizes with no one but, himself. But here's the weird thing. He's out of the hospital. He is back to the White House. And like I said, I got to wonder if you're working in the White House, are you going to go bring him his bowl of ice cream? You're going to go clean up after him? You got to wonder. But here's the thing. And people are saying, well, he should have stayed in the hospital. I'm going, no, you can recreate the same hospital setting in the White House. He has a team of doctors at his beck and call at every moment. He's got a life flight helicopter right outside. He's gonna be just fine. Now, for me, the part of this that's important to all of this, is that he was diagnosed within minutes, really within minutes of him coming down with it. He was immediately seen by a doctor within minutes of the test results. In fact, when he was on the phone with Sean Hannity on, I guess it was Thursday, was it Thursday? They knew he had already tested positive. So while he's talking about, Hope Hicks has got it, he knew he had it. But they knew, and they were already working to get him what he needed, any drugs he needed. Don't worry about the cost. Taxpayer will cover that. But immediately got all the care that in fact, more care than you could possibly room. A six-room presidential suite at Walter Reed Hospital. I'm going, 2 not enough? How many soldiers could those other 4 rooms have helped out? Just throwing that out there. But he has the best care the world can provide. So if anyone should be able to survive it, should be that guy. Now, I took a road trip today to Philadelphia. One of those, I had a meeting I had to go to, and it was one of those things where I flipped on right-wing crazy blather, and it was fun listening to the talking heads just exploding. They went from mocking contact tracing, to comparing it to the childish game of Clue, to why is it that only Republicans are getting it? Is this a Democratic ploy to stall the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett? To now Donald Trump connects with the COVID crowd. And it was one of these just weird, bizarre kind of days. I mean, the first guy talking about Clue, mocking contact tracing. He was going on about, on Twitter, they've got all these pictures and they're circling the people and who they were talking to. And you go, hey, dum-dum, that's exactly how they find out who to go talk to next. That's how they trace who gave it to who and who gave it to the next person and the next person and the next person. That's it. You figured it out. Congratulations. So who Chris Christie was talking to at the Rose Garden event is kind of important, because you'll want to know who they talked to, because they probably got it and spread it over there. Why they've called it a super spreader event. Just kind of throwing it out there. Maybe something you might want to consider, considering you've got a ton of Republicans who have got it. And oh, by the way, the reason Republicans are getting it, because they didn't practice social distancing, because they went to the super spreader event and sat right next to each other without masks on. If you really want to know why only Republicans right now are getting it, is because they've been flaunting the idea that it's a hoax, it doesn't matter, it's ridiculous, we're tougher than this, we'll never get it because we're in our bubble. Well, guess what? It got into the bubble. And now you find, down the list, a couple of senators. Today we find out there's Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary's now got it. Ronna McDaniels, the RNC chair, had it. Chris Christie's actually in the hospital. He didn't do any drive-arounds or any of that. They haven't released him yet. But Christie's still in the hospital. So down the line of all these folks, Kellyanne Conway, probably her entire family now. Hey, nice job, Kelly. All of these Republicans now have it because they didn't bother to just, even while sitting next to each other, wear the mask. And the pictures are out there from the Rose Garden event that this guy was mocking. He's going, oh, what am I, an amateur sleuth? And, yeah, dum-dum. You probably might want to know who you're talking to the next time they spit in your face so that maybe you don't get sick. Just kind of throwing it out there. Now we find out that the White House, and this is, again, not surprising, the White House will not contact trace any of the super spreader Rose Garden event. They they have literally come out and said they're not going to do it, and no explanation given. Invasion of their privacy. None of the talk about we need to protect who they were with. Absolutely crazy. And the more you look at, and as I said, I was listening to the right-wing blather, Limbaugh, and the rest of them. And it's just so insane that, when the virus first happened, my wife and I had this conversation about, how is this going to play out? What are we, how are we going to deal with this? And I said, sadly, the country is going to have to go through it because a large segment of the population, the people who listen to those blethering idiots, they have a hyper self-esteem. They have a hyper view of themselves. Oh, I'll get through it. We don't need no stinking masks. And they're going to be the demise of the rest of us. So it's going to cause us a lot of pain and suffering, and obviously a lot of money, and obviously a lot of everything. Because they clearly don't care about the rest of us. They clearly have no view of what anyone else thinks. It's about them. And the more I listen to right-wing blather, the more I listen to the talking heads talk about, oh, well, it's a conspiracy because they're trying to slow down, the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. And you go, no, it's because you're irresponsible. It's because you're stupid. You did this to yourself. And you're even more irresponsible by not coming out and saying, look, this is the result of not following the simple guidelines. This is the result of being arrogant. This is the result of being childish. This is the result of all of this. And, we can go back to the Sturgis rally and the contact tracing that's come out of that. We find out, a couple 100,000 new cases come out of that. And it's going to get worse in the coming weeks and months because we're heading into that season. So to have a president who now is going to take the position, and we know this is going to be the new campaign because the Trump talking head already said it. Donald Trump has the experience now. Joe Biden didn't get COVID. He doesn't have the experience. This is now going to be the talking point. This is how ridiculous our politic has become. Where the conversation should be, how do we get the health care that Donald Trump got? How do we get the access to the health care and not have to worry about going broke? Because it's my understanding that the course of treatment, the drug that he got, this Remdesivir, is like $5,000 for the course. If you don't have health insurance, for 5 pills, or 5 doses or whatever, can you get it? And look, I've talked to people who they can't get tests done now. They're told to come back on a Wednesday, or hey, we're only testing people who have symptoms. As where we got a president who's tested multiple times. Literally, they knew within, I would argue minutes, but probably hours of him contracting this. They knew right then. And they didn't send him away. They didn't say, oh, go home and have some chicken soup. Go home and curl up and read a good book. They didn't say any of that. They took the most aggressive measures possible. So if he does make it through this, the conversation should be, well, okay, how did we keep him from not getting sick? What courses of treatment did he get? How do we make sure that all Americans get access to care like he got? And I know that's, well, we can't have that. Can't have that. We couldn't do that for everybody, just the president. How can we get close to that? Over the weekend, I had conversations with people who were saying, look, I can't get insulin. I can't get, certain medicines because our medical system is so screwed up. It's crazy. And it's getting worse. And with this lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court that will undo the Affordable Care Act, it's going to get even harder. And it's going to cause more pain and suffering at the worst possible moment. At a moment when we're all looking towards the next couple of months, worried about what this is going to be. But I guarantee you the message coming out of this is going to be, it's not a big deal. There's no need for any of these extreme measures, like staying away from people and wearing masks and closing schools or any of that. It's like anything else. It's like the mumps or the measles or the chicken pox. You just got to get it and you got to power through it. And the ones that don't survive, they're weak and they need to go. That's how we thin the herd. I'm telling you, and I've been telling you this for a while. This is the message that this is their message. And if you just happen to be one of those weak folks, well, better luck next time, I guess. If you're old or sick, they don't care about you. And the reality is they keep telling you that day after day after day. And every action that this guy has taken, every action of this administration just proves that to me more and more every day. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Dr. Kelly Sennholz is going to be here to share some thoughts on the president's condition, on the treatment, and, well, wherever else it takes us. Quick break. Right back.
Then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day Henry George accepted the nomination to run for mayor of New York on the United Labor Party ticket. In cities across the country, trade unionists met to found state labor parties and to hammer out political platforms for local and state elections. In New York City, ULP advocates issued the Clarendon Hall platform and nominated Henry George as the ULP candidate for the mayoral race. George had gained prominence with the 1879 publishing of his book, Progress and Poverty. In it, he addressed private land ownership as the basis for inequality and advocated for a single tax system. At New York's Cooper Union that evening, where thousands of supporters gathered, George addressed the crowd. He presented the ULP platform of higher wages, shorter hours, better working conditions, government ownership of railroads and communications, and the end to police repression. Burroughs and Wallace described the scene that night in their book, Gotham, A History of New York City to 1898. During his speech, George declared, quote, "This government of New York City, our whole political system is rotten to the core." He argued that politicians had made a trade out of assembling votes and selling them to powerful interests. What business got in return was police protection, lax enforcement of housing and health codes, friendly judges, and fat franchises. To purify the political order, working class voters had to sever ties to all the established parties and choose from their own ranks. For a party that had just been founded weeks before, George came in second. But like its sister organization in Chicago, the New York ULP would split over issues of socialism within a year.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So our tweet of the day, and again, this is another one of those moments where you go, exactly, if you're the doctor, how do you handle what transpired this weekend? The Dr. Leanne Wen tweeted out today, if real Donald Trump were my patient in unstable condition plus contagious illness, and he suddenly left the hospital to go for a car ride that endangered himself and others, I'd call security to restrain him, then perform a psychiatric evaluation to examine his decision-making capacity. Sadly, Dr. Wen, that's the reason you're not a doctor at Walter Reed Hospital. Probably need that. We definitely do. And here to share some thoughts on, maybe she's right. Maybe we needed to tie him to the bed and hold him down and do a psych eval. I've asked Dr. Kelly Senholz to come talk to us, our resident expert on all things medical. Dr. Senholz, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, good to see you.
So is the good Dr. Wen, is she kind of right? Should he have been allowed to leave the facility and drive around in a hermetically sealed vehicle with Secret Service agents?
Dr. Wen said it a lot nicer than I did. I said, if we had a patient like this, we would shoot him in the butt with some Haldol, tie him to the bed to protect himself and the rest of the staff, and order the psych eval. He would have been evaluated and transferred to a psych ward within hours.
Yeah. Now, the big story today, obviously, is the doctor at Walter Reed not really giving any real information, and not answering the question of when Trump last tested positive or last tested negative. Why is it important that we know that when Trump tested positive? Why is that important?
Well, it's not only when he tested positive. They want to know because they want to know about the safety of all the people he came in contact with, but they also need to know what his scans look like, how serious was his disease. The issue here is they're trying to find out about the treatment he received. He received something which is called monoclonal antibodies, and monoclonal antibodies are, everybody's got thousands of antibodies running around in their body all the time. And so what they did is they selected out antibodies that were just specific for this virus, which is really expensive. I think it's in the hundreds of thousands for a dose. This is a very expensive drug. So in tests, in monkeys and in SARS virus, the first SARS virus, it completely got rid of the disease. The antibodies gobbled it all up, and that was that. So a lot of doctors are theorizing that his rapid improvement has to do with that. There are some studies going on with a thing called nanobodies. And what this is tiny, tiny man-made versions of it. So a lot of the questions you're hearing from the doctors, they're trying to figure out how sick was he? Did his recovery have to do with the antibodies? But really right now, it's a little concerning that he hasn't really recovered so much as the steroids are masking his symptoms right now. He's obviously floridly manic. He absolutely has a psychiatric problem that needs to be addressed, and not addressing a psychiatric problem this serious in a patient with a potentially fatal disease is very problematic.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the steroids, and I've taken them once or twice, to where I'll tell you, Trump's tweet today that he feels 20 years younger. I took prednisone a couple of years ago, and it made my knee feel great. It made my hip feel great. It virtually made me feel 20 years younger, but it's not sustainable. So, how much of that is, the steroid like you're talking about it, and how much it is this miracle drug that most of us are never going to be able to get anywhere near?
Well, the problem is it's probably the steroid, to be honest with you. The steroid is making him euphoric. Now, often we'll hospitalize people to give steroids, and that may be why he was there. Because if you have an underlying psychiatric illness and you get a steroid, it can throw you off. Like suicide rate is very high, becoming manic like this. It's a common known symptom of steroid use that makes it dangerous. And here we have a man who's totally out of control. He, driving around the hospital, he's absolutely acting insane, and nobody can stop him. I mean, who's going to call the security guard on the president?
That's an excellent point. With a Secret Service detail right there, you're right. But here's the thing. My point is, okay, this is great. I hope he gets through this. I hope he gets to the other side. I'm thrilled that we've used him as a guinea pig for the manabodies or whatever it is. Now, how can we make sure that every American has access to the kind of care that he got, or at least something somewhere similar? I mean, look, he had a team of doctors I would argue from the minute he tested positive, who were deciding on how they were going to deal with this, and not told, oh, just go back to the White House, hang out till you get bad. How do we do that?
Well, here's the problem. All the treatments he got are, what a sick person might get. However, the antibodies, the monoclonal antibodies he got, nobody's going to get those. There's no way for us to manufacture enough of them. They're, way too expensive to give to everybody who's sick. And also, he got them early in the course. It's not as clear what would happen if you waited to give them until somebody was, for instance, needing to be on the ventilator and you wanted to avoid that. It's not clear that they would be useful in that situation. It might be too late, or the dose might have to be 10 times as high.
Right.
So it's not really useful, medically useful.
Yeah. So is it possible, because, I was listening to Right Wing Blather today on a long car ride. And, they were like, why is it that only Republicans are getting this? Is this a Democratic plot to undo Amy Coney Barrett? And, the whole 9 yards. And I'm going, no, it's because they were stupid and irresponsible. And, now that you've laid out this course of treatment, is it possible that they knew this was there for them, which is why they've been so irresponsible that, hey, they know there's a secret treatment, or they know there's a cure there for them, just not for the rest of us? I mean, or is that too conspiratorial?
I think they're not smart enough to figure that out. But what I do think is they just really thought they weren't going to get it. This is like a mass delusion. We've had situations, I don't know if you remember years ago, there was a bunch of people that all got sick with the same symptoms. And after they investigated it, they realized it was like a mass delusion. They saw somebody else with the symptoms, got afraid, and they started having the symptoms. It's kind of like they're all delusional about their ability to avoid getting deathly ill, and they really believe it. I mean, if you talk to them, you get down to the point where you say, okay, what if you get it? What if you get the virus? What'll happen? And then their mind just blows. They can't go there. They start talking about something else. They just really don't think they're going to get it because Trump has told them that.
Yeah. And now that he's got it, I mean, on Friday, I said, look, this could go a couple of different ways. It could go really poorly for him if he does have it, which I'll tell you, my first reaction was, I don't buy it. But I now, I think they've raised the bar to the point to where he's got it. They just now have the miracle cure for him, not the rest of us. But, like I said, I thought it was a hoax at first. And I said, the beginning, I knew Monday he was going to be released. I knew there was going to be this big show, and the message out of it was going to be, see, he went through it. It's not a big deal, and we don't need to do any of the other stuff. No contact tracing, no social distancing. You don't even have to wear the mask. It's not a big deal. And this is where we are.
It's pretty horrifying. And the one treatment he got that really worked for him is the one nobody else is going to get. So he's telling a story that's not even based in reality. He's telling a story that absolutely is not going to happen for the majority of Americans. new estimates are, if we continue down the course we're on right now, we could be at 3,000 deaths a day within weeks. And we're just going down that path. That's
Yeah.
where we're headed.
But what do you say to the
People-
person, Kelly? What do you say to the person who goes, you know, we got to live our lives. You know, this is costing us more lives in mental health, this alcohol, domestic violence. You know, all the we just gotta power through it. You know, we gotta just suck it up, and be tough about it. And the strong will survive. And well, if you're weak, well, too bad.
Well, the fact is, a lot of people might die, and maybe the strong will survive, maybe the young will survive, but we're talking about 1 million people dying. I mean, this would have an amazingly negative impact on our economy, on our families, our lives, depression all over our country. And people don't really understand, after World War II, we talked about this morning, after World War II, most countries didn't want Germans in their country. They thought of them as bad or weird people or dangerous people. And so all these German people were sent back to Germany. It's going to be like that for Americans all over the world. People are watching this. They think all of us are that crazy, and they're, our welcome mat across the world has been rolled up. They don't want us there. The impacts of this behavior are far-reaching beyond just the humanitarian issue of killing millions of people. This will destroy us.
No, I fear you're right, and just the simple. I actually heard someone going on and mocking contact tracing. As I was driving to Philly today, the guy was blathering on about, how they're playing an amateur game of sleuth, and how it's all stupid. And I don't care who talked to who. And you go, no, that's the science of figuring out who got what and how we control it. That's part of the science of doing this. It's part of the reason that we're able to control things. And I listen to this and I'm just shaking my head that I know there are people driving next to me going, it's all stupid.
The idea that a lot of the Trumpers think that the daily testing that the White House gets is how they're preventing it in the White House. Testing doesn't prevent it at all. Wearing a mask and distancing and following guidelines prevents the virus from spreading, but testing doesn't do anything. And we're seeing the result of that now. I mean, people may die in the Washington, D.C. area and all over the country from the infection at the White House. People that never contacted them or didn't even know them 2 or 3 infections down the line.
No, I mean, Ron Johnson, a senator from Wisconsin, we find out went to, some big, like farm event, and you go, and he knew he had it. I mean, there's other stories that are like this. I mean, it's angering, it's frustrating. And I think, again, back to the contact tracing, I think at some point we've got to do like the Chinese have done. And if you've been found to be around somebody who's had it, we got to pull you away from the rest of us because you're a danger.
Yes, actually, people don't realize this. We've always done that.
Sure.
There are tuberculosis, for instance, has strains that are not very treatable. And so even if you give the medication, they still are infectious. And so we detain those people. We put them in quarantine and we watch them every day and watch them take their medications. This is nothing new to quarantine people for a dangerous infectious disease.
No, it's crazy. But here's the thing. I mean, we now know Trump went to the event in Bedminster with a whole bunch of his funders, which you go, really, is that how you want to run your campaign? You're going to kill off all your fundraising efforts? But there were 184 people at that fundraiser who now they all went home and they all talked to somebody and they all talked to somebody. And you can see how this just, if you don't figure out how to rein that in, how this just explodes.
And the sad part is the people that are following the rules, who have been staying home and staying away and not going out and not doing fun things. Like we've all put our lives on hold for this. Just got a call, a friend of mine that couldn't go to a closing on a house because the rate is going up in that town. It's affected everybody's lives. And the Trump people are walking around as if nothing has happened. They're going to parties, they're, mingling and causing all of the problem.
But here's the thing, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. I go back to those weeks back in March and April. Had we just all stayed the hell home, had everybody just locked down, had we done the smart things that we were talking about doing back then, we probably wouldn't be in this moment.
You and I had that conversation, and I said every hour matters here. We need to lock down the country. We need to put on masks. Everybody needs to follow the rules, and we can beat this. And if we don't beat it, a lot of people are going to die. We said that, and we've watched it unfold right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you. Some of the messages I've gotten from my Trump supporters go, see, he kicked COVID's behind. He's not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination at this moment, is he?
Oh my gosh, no. It's very typical for people with COVID to get a second round of illness that's worse, and they can deteriorate rapidly. Now, again, he's had the monoclonal antibodies. That's the thing. We don't know what that means. But as far as a typical person with COVID, he's more likely than not to have a relapse. We just don't know. We're going to sit here and watch him.
Yeah, well, I mean, fortunate for him, he's got an on-call medical staff that's right there with him at every moment of every day. He's got a life flight helicopter right outside the door. He's got an entire hospital at his beck and call with a 7-room, suite just waiting for him, or a 6-room suite just waiting for him. If anyone should get through this, it should be him.
Yes, and one of the doctors today, Dr. Topol, said his risk of death, because of his age, his predisposing conditions, he had a 35% chance of dying, but that's a 65% chance of not dying. As far as I know, that hasn't changed. Again, the monoclonal antibodies are a little bit of a hitch in our predictor ability, but 35% chance of death was definitely serious.
As I said, I wish him a recovery so that when we vote him out in November, he can be arrested, perp walked, tried, convicted, and jailed for hopefully a very long time. Just my thoughts.
Brother. Thank you.
Dr. Sennholz, I appreciate the time. As always, I appreciate your expertise.
Thanks. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks so much. Our good friend, Dr. Kelly Sennholz. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was a day known in Hollywood as Black Friday. After World War II, the movie industry began to rake in profits. But they did not pass those profits along to their employees. 10,000 members of the Conference of Studio Unions were on strike. They were part of the Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners. They were also in a jurisdictional battle with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, or IATSE, over who should represent stage decorators. The strike wore on for half a year. The studios had more than 100 films backlogged and were able to wait out the strikers. But as the strike continued and the studios remained silent, pressure mounted. Despite the tensions between the two unions, thousands of IATSE members refused to cross the picket lines. On Black Friday, the strikers decided to concentrate their efforts at the Warner Brothers Studios gate. 300 picketers gathered to hold the line. Scabs, hired by Warner Brothers, tried to drive through the workers' picket lines to the studio. Variety accounted what happened next, writing, quote, "Strikers deployed from their barricades, halted non-strikers, and rolled 3 automobiles on their sides. By noon, reinforcements arrived from both sides." guests. Firemen were called in to turn their hoses on the striking workers. Warner Brothers security deployed tear gas. Common for the time, accusations were hurled that the Conference of Studio Union strikers were communists. As a result of the strike, the Conference of Studio Union's employees were assigned to other jobs in the studios. When they refused, they were locked out. The union never recovered. The violence at the Warner Brothers Studios gate also helped to fuel the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act through Congress, which eroded union protections. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Donald Trump says he's gone to school. Yeah, getting COVID is like going to school, evidently. He says he now understands in a bigly way that's, I guess, why his Department of Transportation shot down a mask mandate for people, riding buses or planes or trains or any of that. I guess his extreme education on the COVID, I guess his now personal experience with the virus has led him to believe that, you know what, those train conductors, those pilots, they'll be fine without it. Those Secret Service agents in the hermetically sealed vehicle, they'll be fine. Screw them. Scary, dangerous, and as always, irresponsible. And here to share some thoughts on just how crazy this has been, I've asked our good friend Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime, Rick.
So have you seen this? Evidently, our Department of Transportation has rejected the idea that we should mandate that passengers wear masks while flying or riding on crowded buses or crowded transit vehicles because, well, it would make, who knows why.
I mean, they take their cues from their dear leader, and their dear leader believes that a mask is a sign of weakness. This is the views of the leader become the views of the party. That's what the Amy Coney Barrett swearing in ceremony revealed, that from the judicial branch to the legislative branch to the executive branch, the modern Republican Party believes in taking on stupid risks frontally and in the face. Not only the pictures, by the way, of the outdoor event, which we have access to, but there were indoor events with much less ventilation that might have actually been the main cause of the spread. But I mean, the Department of Transportation is run by Mitch McConnell's wife. And Mitch McConnell and Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation, they believe in loyalty to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is anti-mask, ergo the Transportation Department is anti-mask. And I think it's great that you're asking about the Department of Transportation, Rick, because people just don't really talk about what Trump is doing across the government. They focus on the Trump show, makes it all about him. And that is really what he is interested in. But we as Americans, we're more impacted by what happens at these departments, places like the Department of Transportation or the Department of Agriculture or the Defense Department. And they're all endangering us.
No, look, Jeff, as a working person, I'm like you, like me, like our listeners and viewers. We got to get up and we got to go to work tomorrow. We've got to, put in our time to support our families, and the conditions in those workplaces haven't gotten any better. The attempts to pretend like they're making them safer haven't happened. In fact, you still got Mitch McConnell saying that we want a liability shield for employers if they pass any stimulus. So they're creating a dangerous workplace. So for me, this is the number one issue. Whether Trump lives or dies, take this how you have to and be angry with me if you have to. I don't care. What I care about is my coworkers. I care about my neighbors. I care about my friends and families having to go into dangerous workplaces because of him. I care about those workers at the White House who had to be behind him when he ripped the mask off defiantly and walked into the White House. I care about them.
Exactly. I mean, the Secret Service person who had to drive Trump around yesterday afternoon, the vehicle that Trump is driven around in is designed to survive a chemical warfare attack, which, I guess makes a certain amount of sense. But what it means is air doesn't go in or out as easily as in a normal vehicle, which which means that these basically there's going to be a buildup of that virus in that vehicle, and the presumably healthy Secret Service person, pretty good chance that person now has COVID. That person may live with a parent who's a senior citizen. They may have a kid who's special needs. I mean, there's all sorts of potential endangerment down the line, and Trump doesn't care. He views himself as royalty. He thinks that becoming president makes you royalty, and the state is him, and he is the state.
It's scary stuff, and sadly there are very few voices out there standing up for workers. But here's the thing: you've got House Homeland Security Chairman Benny Thompson, who has said that he's requested a briefing from the Secret Service on the safeguards that they're going to have for the Secret Service agents. And I'm like, that's great. I'm thrilled that someone cares about the Secret Service agents. But what about the people who have to bring him his ice cream? What about the people who have to clean up after him in the White House? What about the people who clean and do all of the other stuff? What are we doing for them?
I actually, I've been too busy to do, and I wish I'd done a better job, but I've begun poking around on who works at the White House in terms of whether or not they have union representation. Apparently, some allies were trying to find out if SEIU might represent some of them as contractors, but a surprising number of people, or it shouldn't be that surprising, the people who work at the White House, they're not unionized employees like many of the federal government employees, they're contractors. And this is just, the course of government in the last several decades has been an outsourcing of work to government contractors where the companies make a lot of money, but the workers themselves get treated as disposable. And so I think if we had a unionized workforce at the White House, people would probably be in much better shape. There have been much more pushback on the ways in which Trump is endangering people. But right now, with unemployment so high, you're forcing a lot of workers to make a really awful decision between unsafe working conditions and no work at all. And with the decline in unemployment benefits, people have to provide for their families. It's a choice is being forced upon people in a rich country that should just never. This should not be a choice that people have to make.
Well, it's not really a choice. I mean, live or die.
Yeah.
Live or die. It's the comedian as Eddie Izzard, cake or death. Pick one, because there's no middle ground here. And for me, this is where I think it's important to have these conversations on, because right now, as we speak, the NLRB is figuring out how to push the independent contractor rule a little bit further to save employers a little bit more money and to push for more of the kind of contracting that you're talking about. And you're not going to have a choice. I had a long conversation with a friend who said, well, I should have the choice to be, my own boss or work for a company. I go, yeah, you should have that choice. It shouldn't be forced upon you because the industry went in that direction. And that's what's going to happen in this country because of this administration.
Yeah, I mean, what government should be doing is setting up background rights that make people create a baseline of decency for everyone's life. It's not exactly guaranteeing the same outcome for everybody, but every American is entitled to a decent life. And that includes in our conditions as workers. There was a tremendous and very scary article in the American Prospect, I believe it was today, about Uber and Lyft and the amount of money they're spending in California on the ballot initiative. I believe it's AB 22.
Prop 22, yeah.
Yeah, and it's they are trying to overturn a rule to protect Uber and Lyft and other so-called gig economy workers. And right now the spending is 183 million to 10 million. And that goes to show you that these companies, which are losing money, but they are basically bets by venture capitalists that eventually they will get a monopoly. And the benefits of the monopoly will not be shared with the workers, of course. But basically, these companies can lose money, but they have to show some path in the future to profitability for their venture capital Ponzi scheme. And they are going to treat their workers as badly as possible. I remember speaking to the Department of Transportation 6-7 years ago, these companies were talking about how they were going to have automated drivers a few years down the line. That's, of course, a few years back, and they're nowhere. That's, not doable. You can't replace people as drivers. And these companies, their only path to not burning through billions and billions of capital is A, to hope for a terrible recession, which, lucky for them, they have right now. So workers can't really bargain well. And then to take over the political process and bargain down people's rights and immiserate people. And that's what they're doing in California. And they're willing to spend already more than $180 million to do so.
No,
That's
I mean,
just one state.
No, I mean what they're doing is, they've set up their business model based on what the trucking industry did, 30 years ago. I mean, you find desperate, exploitable workers, and I had a friend, an acquaintance, who was a recruiter for one of the big over-the-road trucking companies, and he would go to homeless shelters and say, "You want a job in a house?" Because you'd basically live in the truck and you were a sweatshop on wheels, but at least you had a place to stay and you made a little bit of money. That was his pitch, and that's what they did. And you go back to pre-Reagan, Jimmy Carter destroying the trucking industry, and those were family-sustaining jobs. They were good, solid, middle-class income jobs that supported families. And now they're sweatshops on wheels.
Yeah, I mean, the Carter presidency definitely deserves greater scrutiny as one of the great missed opportunities in American history. I'm reading Rick Perlstein's book, Reaganland, and it's fourth in a series of books that take you from 1960 to 1980 and the rise of far-right extremism, which had been thought to be on the outs in America and became ascendant with Reagan. But Carter was a key figure, obviously not an entirely malevolent person. He had some, continues to have some good impulses as well, but terrible on labor issues, terrible on working people's issues, reflected a real arrogance toward workers. And that was like the last opportunity to hold at bay the corporate America is taking over of American politics.
No, and look, you had the neoliberals pushing, back then. I mean, the deregulation of trucking and airline, and look where we are today. The airline industry just laid off a whole ton of people. The virus had an awful lot to do with that, obviously, but the power that the unions had back then, completely diminished at this point.
And that's why, I do believe from everything I've heard that Joe Biden looks in the mirror and sees a pro-labor Democrat. That is his self-image, and that's a very good and useful thing. What I think groups like Revolving Door Project and our allies are going to hope to do is to try to make sure he lives up to that self-image that I do believe he has, which is a good self-image, a good starting place. And so we hope that people who have worked for Uber and helped them avoid proper government regulation the last several years will be kept out of office. I mean, there's this guy, Seth Harris, who was a deputy labor secretary under Obama. He's kind of skulking around in the background of the Biden transition. And that's very worrisome. He's been doing work on trying to figure out a third way on whether or not someone is a contractor or an employee. And there is no third way. Like, you're either it's a pretty, not all binaries are reasonable, but it's pretty reasonable. Like, are you in charge or do you work for somebody? And it's clear that Uber and Lyft and a lot of these other companies tell you what you're doing. And that means you're an employee and you should have the protections that we as a society have created, not enough, but at least some for working people. And I really, truly hope that Biden does not appoint Uber Democrats into a Biden administration.
I'm from your lips, because look, the sad reality is the reason I think a lot of the working class has left the Democratic Party is because you've got so many corporate Democrats. You go back to obviously the Carter years of deregulation, the Clinton years of the DLC, and obviously they attacked labor within the government as well as anyone. And also didn't get the strike replacement bill passed. There hasn't been a lot of places for working class people to go, which is why I think the anger has led them to someone like Trump.
Right. But what's interesting is that if you think about what especially the Clinton era, New Democrats and DLC Democrats, and just before that, the Atari Democrats, which were the 1980s version of the New Democrats, they all claimed that they were going to help secure better educated suburban people, white people, for the Democratic Party. And Donald Trump has hastened that occurring. And the surprisingly good thing is that if you look at the polling of these suburban voters, these recent Republicans, they're much better on economic issues than you might otherwise fear. They're not anti-union. They do believe in a role for a democratic society to regulate corporate excess. They're much better than I think people fear or caricature. And so I do think that a better Democratic Party could move to regain the working class vote, the white working class vote in the Midwest and elsewhere that they have been losing. I don't think that vote is incompatible any longer with some of the college-educated voters, and that would be really powerful if you could add people, a diverse coalition along all races, and including both less and better educated whites as well.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that whole idea that, well, you're going to lose that good paying manufacturing job that back in the 1980s was paying you 65 grand a year with the best health care and a defined benefit pension. We're going to train you to be better. Those people were happy with what they had. And by saying, oh, we'll train you for something better, really degrading in my view.
Yeah, I mean, there's not one job fits all Americans, and all Americans are entitled to good, decent treatment by the government and by their fellow Americans. And just a basic doctrine of fairness and equality under the law would lead to radical results, but is not really a radical, more complex moral vision. Yeah. Fairness is like something we should just try to give a shot.
Yeah, real quick, back to what we were talking about at the beginning before we got sidetracked. And look, this is important conversation in my view about labor rights. To me, front and center should be the most important issue of this election because Trump hasn't been good for workers or for labor in this country. In fact, you know, I was just having a conversation with some labor leaders today who fear that if he's reelected, it's the end of the labor movement. And that's not being hyperbolic. That's being honest. The destruction of labor rights under this administration has accelerated, and it will only get worse in another term.
Yeah, I think that there will be no more federal public employee unions if Trump is reelected, like right off the bat. I mean, I think the end of civil service protections happens in the first year or two. I would imagine that Trump would try to coerce the car manufacturers into going after the UAW. You referenced truckers, like there's, I think it's like the last pelt that they need to add to the wall. If you're, the last remaining Koch brother and all the rest of them, I think they have not stopped hoping to end the American labor movement. It's in our job to disappoint them.
Absolutely. That's why November 3rd so important. Jeff, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you, my friend.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Good stuff. Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Make sure you check out their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. We'll make sure we get links out on how you can do that. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1983. That was the day that Lech Walesa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work founding the Solidarity Union of Poland. The son of a carpenter, Walesa worked as an electrician in a shipyard. He was fired from his job for working to organize a union. Solidarity grew to include 10 million Poles. In 1981, Walesa was arrested and detained for nearly a year. He did not attend the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony because he feared he would not be allowed back into Poland once he left the country. His wife, Danuta, accepted the prize on his behalf. The speech he sent to the ceremony served as an inspiration to Polish Solidarity members and workers around the world. He wrote, "Let my words convey to you the joy and the never extinguished hope of the millions of my brothers, the millions of working people in factories and offices associated in the union whose very name expresses one of the noblest aspirations of humanity. Today, all of them, like myself, feel greatly honored by the prize. With deep sorrow, I think of those who paid with their lives for the loyalty to solidarity, of those who are behind prison bars and who are victims of repression. I think of all of those with whom I have traveled the same road and with whom I have shared the trials and tribulations of our time. We are fighting for the right of the working people to association and for the dignity of human labor." Walesa and his fellow workers did not give up on the dream of solidarity. They continued to organize against the communist government for the rights of workers. In 1990, Walesa was elected president of Poland.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Shortly after taking office, Trump puffed himself up in full Trumpian pomposity to proclaim, "We will honor the American people with the truth and nothing else." Well, nothing else unless you count a record-shattering number of more than 20,000 documented lies he's uttered in only 3.5 years. He's now lying that a tsunami of voter fraud is about to hit our land and deny him re-election. Of course, as every investigation has concluded, the only widespread voter fraud in our country is the GOP fraud that voter fraud is rampant. But what's really at work here is that the Donald is in a cold panic about losing, so his only hope is to do two things. First, use the fraud bugaboo as an excuse to restrict voting in precincts that vote for Democrats. And second, delegitimize a Democratic win in advance by creating the myth that his loss could only be caused by hordes of illegal voters. Thus, he and his obsequious political party are actually spending untold millions of dollars in a disgraceful effort to try to keep American voters from casting ballots. Their tactics are worthy of the sleaziest of tin-pot dictators from the banana republics of old. For example, they've simply closed the neighborhood voting places in thousands of Democratic areas, and they've monkeyed with our nation's postal service in a crude effort to restrict mail-in voting. Then, William Barr, Trump's pathetic toady of an attorney general, even tried to boost the trickster's chances by ludicrously suggesting it might not be illegal for his backers to vote twice. This is Jim Hightower saying, so now, after promising he'd tell us nothing but the truth, Trump declared this year that he's entitled to re-election because, unlike so many who came before me, I keep my promises. Obviously, that's his fattest lie yet.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, this quote from Dr. Leanna Wen, I got to tell you, the more I read it, the more I go, I would love to see someone say, no, Donald, you can't leave. Orderlies grab him, throw him on the cart, strap him down. We're taking him for a psych eval. Anyway, her tweet is, if real Donald Trump were my patient in unstable condition plus contagious illness, and he suddenly left the hospital to go for a car ride that endangered himself and others, I'd call security to restrain him and then perform a psychiatric evaluation to examine his decision-making capacity. I got to tell you, that last part, the need to examine his decision-making capacity, I think that's day one. I don't know that's day one of COVID illness. I think that's day one of, my crowd was bigger than anyone. When you look at the photos, sorry, Donald. Not there. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on maybe, is Dr. Wen right? Is this what should have happened? I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to share some thoughts with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So is she off base? Is this something that would normally happen to any one of us had we showed up in the in the hospital with COVID, and we go, yeah, we're gonna go for a car ride. We're gonna go wave on with people on the street.
No, she's absolutely correct. That is what would happen, particularly in Trump's case, because, I mean, again, we have an elderly patient at this point who's receiving very high-dose experimental medications, and including medications that we know can cause delirium, can cause psychosis, can cause mania. They would definitely call a psych consult at that point. And they would have the power to hold that person in the hospital. We have means to do that. And, you know, everything from medication to restraints, all in the interest of keeping that patient safe and also reducing liability for, you know, if this person goes out and hurts themselves or hurts somebody else, then the hospital, the doctors, the team that was taking care of him is responsible for having let that person out when they weren't safe to be out in the public.
Right. Now, you know, look, obviously there were tweets from one of the attending physicians there at Walter Reed saying just that. I mean, the fact that he went out in the Joyride vehicle there, put those Secret Service agents at risk. They now need, according to him, to be quarantined because, as the guy pointed out, it's a hermetically sealed vehicle. They don't want chemical, you know, weapons to get in, which means it's really hard to get stuff out too. So, you know, horribly irresponsible, but not unpredictable.
No, absolutely not. And again, this is why I've been saying since, you know, the day he was inaugurated, even before that.
Right here.
That exactly. That if you really sat him down with a psychiatrist and did a thorough psychiatric evaluation, there would be a lot of things that would raise questions about his ability to do this job safely in the best interest of the American people. I think that was evident from day one. But what we saw him do at Walter Reed and what he's done for this entire, you know, last 4 to 5 years is basically evade that happening, right? He's running away from that possibility. And because he has the power to say, you know, I'm the president. You can't force me to do anything. And he's been able to say that not only to his doctors, but he's been able to say that to Congress, to the Department of Justice, right? So in that sense, you know, having seen all of these hundreds of people fail at reining him in, at stopping him from doing what he wants to do, you know, it was sort of a fool's errand to expect that the people in the hospital were going to be able to, you know, do what we would ordinarily do to just a regular civilian on the street.
Right.
You know, he has the power to stop them from doing that.
Now, he was given what they're saying is an experimental drug that, you know, according to my Dr. Senholz in the last segment, you know, said, you know, it's about $100,000, I guess, to get a dose of this. And
right.
the chances of you or me ever getting are damn near impossible, or actually impossible. You know, this is one of those moments where the message that's going to come out of this White House is the virus isn't that big of a deal. Look, Donald Trump got through it. You know, he's an old guy, he's overweight, and he got through it. He's a tough guy. It's not a big deal. We shouldn't close bars and restaurants and schools, and we should just power right through it. That's going to be the message, without the caveat of going, yeah, but he got this experimental drug that none of us have access to. So basically, we're walking into a firestorm without a protective suit on.
Absolutely, and we're still in the beginning stages of his illness, right? I mean, I think that's the thing that people need to kind of just calm down and say, okay, you know, it's not that he's cured and he's bounced back and this thing is over for him. This is still the very beginning. I mean, based on, you know, if we can believe the timeline of when he contracted the virus and tested positive for it, you know, there's no guarantee that how he looks walking out today is going to be how he looks even tomorrow morning.
Right.
You know, what we're seeing from this virus is that people who can feel recovered still end up dying. Herman Cain died, you know, a month after he tested positive initially and went through all of the ups and downs of being hospitalized and thought he was on the other side of it. So I think it's definitely premature for anybody to be saying, oh, he beat this thing and this is all the way over. We don't know what the lasting consequences of this are going to be for him.
Yeah. Excellent point. No, but if you listen to right-wing blather today, it was all, you know, he's what a tough guy, and, you know, it's those liberals who can't take that, you know, you can get through this, and it was really just very bizarre. And
oh,
you know,
yeah.
And then the spin came, and again, not bizarre in a way that you go, I can't believe they said it, because I fully expected it. Much like I fully expected he's got experience with the virus, he's now going to get the COVID vote, which is just mind blowing. I guess delusional would be the right word, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's delusional. What they're ultimately doing is denying and disavowing the reality of this entire pandemic. And the reason why they're doing that is because it makes them look terrible. It makes them look atrocious on top of, how they already looked. And this is something that they all downplayed. They all said it was not going to be that big of a deal. And ultimately, it has turned into a very huge big deal. It's turned into an atrocity. And so rather than deal with that on its face, they have to continually cheerlead themselves and say, oh, we won this thing. This is a victory for Trump. Everything that they're saying in the guidelines, they have to contradict that. It has to be 180 degrees opposite. Masks, can stop the spread of the virus. Oh, no, masks are terrible. If you wear a mask, you're weak. And that's even in the midst of Trump coming down with it. I mean, they want to be able to show that not wearing a mask is okay. This idea of herd immunity, I'm calling it herd mentality now, like reflexively. But I think the idea that they want to be able to say, we faced this thing down. It's not as big of a deal as you think it is. We got the virus. We survived it. We're tough. We're strong. Natural selection. Survival of the fittest.
No, absolutely. You heard that, but I also heard the simultaneous conspiracy theory coming out of the right, because I spent a good deal of time today in the car driving to Philadelphia and back for a meeting. So I had the misfortune of having to listen to radio the whole way, and it's all right-wing blather out here. And it went from mocking contact tracing to the conspiracy of, have you noticed it's only Republicans who are getting the virus? And you go, yeah, there's a reason for that. I mean, there's a reason the Republicans right now are getting it. It was called, the Rose Garden event, where people were actually pressured to not wear masks. And it was the event afterwards indoors with poor ventilation, where they were also, encouraged not to wear masks. That's where it happened.
Absolutely. Yeah, but again, I mean, it's like I said about Herman Cain. I mean, that's just a tally. That they don't even include that in the tally. They can't really, fathom any Republican casualties from this virus. I mean, I have certain reasons why I think they don't care that much about Herman Cain. It has a lot to do with him being a black man. But when you look across this, wide array of super spreading that we're seeing, there are a lot of Republicans that are caught up in this. There are a lot of people who look like they may not be the best, in the best health at this moment.
Chris Christie.
Yeah, you got Chris Christie. You got Bill Barr that, he's so far, I don't know what his test results are, but, I mean, you have all of these people, Rudy Giuliani, that were around Trump, and they're in this circle, and ultimately the odds are not in your favor when you start tacking on more and more and more and more people. Some of these people, hopefully they make it through, but again, I think the Republican Party is again, prematurely declaring a victory, and they don't really know what the outcome is going to be for a lot of these people that they call friends. Yeah.
No, I mean, Chris Christie being the one that you go, of any of them, he's probably, one of the more fragile. And as I tweeted out the other day, thank goodness nobody closed an exit on the turnpike on him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and he's hospitalized. And then he says they did it out of abundance of caution, because he has asthma. And then it's like, well, dude, if you have asthma, why would you have really done debate prep in this room with no mask on? I mean, it really is like dying for Trump. Yep. It is a willingness to just throw caution to the wind and say, well, I'm standing in front of this man. He's demanding that I do something. And we already know the way that they admonished the press corps about, why are you wearing a mask? Take that mask off. And you know how aberrant it feels to them to even have the mask on. So even in a moment, if Chris Christie did have some sense of sanity to say, I have asthma, I'm overweight, et cetera, whatever other, health issues he has, the self-preservation was not there to wear that mask because he did not want to upset Trump. And I think that's the part that these Republicans really need to come to grips with, because at the end of the day, they do know people who are affected by this. there are people in their communities that are dying because of this. And that's why the polls are where they are and the American people are so fed up, because there are real numbers on the ground. This is a real tragedy and a loss being felt by people. And just because the Republicans are in this comfy ivory tower where they don't have to see any of this happening doesn't mean that's, not what that's not what the, reality is for everybody else. It's real out here for us.
Right. No, absolutely. And the message for me out of this is that, I've been saying all along, I believed it was airborne. And I believe, even though the CDC didn't come out and absolutely say it until today that they believe it's airborne. This kind of shows, hello, it's airborne. And look at these photos that are going around that some right-wing nitwit this morning was mocking as an amateur game of Clue. This is who these people talk to. These are people that they interacted with, and now a lot of them are sick. So you better go get yourself tested.
Yeah, and fast. And again, I think that's why what they're doing within the White House is so scary, because they're actually shutting down any efforts by the CDC to do contact tracing, to actually figure out, okay, where did these people get it? Was it was the super spreader event, the Supreme Court nomination ceremony? Was it any of these fundraisers that he went to? And if that's the case, because again, modern science is pretty good at this. And they can detect down to the strain of where that's coming from.
Yep.
And who got it and who gave it to who.
No, and this is why, when I was listening to this guy this morning go on about, basically mocking contact tracing, I'm going, you clearly don't understand the science behind it, or this is deliberate in your spreading of misinformation and trying to continue this idea that it's all a big hoax and it's all ridiculous and science is stupid and, just believe. And because he's going on about this, I don't want to live like this. Everything's not a game of Clue and all this blather. And I'm going, you do realize this is how they find how things have spread, where it came from, and then stop others from getting it, right? And look, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but at least, but I get it.
I mean, this guy probably failed every science class he took.
Yeah, well.
Right, and is just completely dismissing it out of hand because he doesn't understand it. But again, when we look around the world and we look at the countries that have managed to contain this thing, right, where they literally don't have new cases, and then if one does pop up, their contact tracing is so superb, right, that they hop right on top of it and they isolate that person and they prevent that person from mingling with other people, and they get it under control so that it's not spreading in their community. Right. And this is something that we literally have not done sufficiently since the beginning of this whole thing.
No, absolutely. And this is what I said earlier. I said, and I've said it, months now I've been saying this. Had we done in March and April, maybe hopefully we would have done it sooner, but we didn't. While we were locked down in March and all of April, had we just stayed the hell home for that period of time, we'd probably be through this already.
Right. But again, we have a sociopath in charge.
Now, I mean, that's absolutely true. But now you've got this moment where there's a debate coming up on Wednesday this week, the VP debate. Now, I know they're going to put a piece of plexiglass between them, which I guess is going to be helpful. But next Wednesday, I guess the 15th, the second presidential debate is scheduled. Is Trump outside of the window of contagious? If this experimental drug does make him feel 20 years younger, and the steroids keep propping him up, and he goes through with it, is he still contagious on that day?
I really am skeptical that we're going to see him out at any public performances for at least the next 2 weeks. Not because they're minding the quarantine specifications, but because I just don't think physically he is going to just bounce right back to where he was, when this whole thing started. I mean, even just tonight when he did this photo op on the balcony of the White House, I don't know if you've seen the video yet, but he's literally gasping for air. He has what we call increased work of breathing. And he's using all of his shoulders, he's using muscles in his neck to gasp for air, and he rips the mask off of his face because you could tell that he was possibly feeling oxygen deprived. and then turned around and walked into the White House with no mask on. And again, you know, we don't know how much of that virus is just percolating around the White House, right? So one of the things we know about the severity of the illness is that it really is contingent upon the viral load in a lot of cases. And it's not just, oh, I have it and I'm over it. If you keep piling on more virus on top of it, then the viral load in your bloodstream is so much higher.
Right, which is why they kept asking the doctor today during that press conference, you know, those questions that he didn't answer. In fact, I don't think there any real answers came out of the press conference today, other than that they're trying to avoid answering the questions.
Exactly, right? And again, I mean, if you think back to any of these recent rallies, Trump has already been up there sweating profusely, grabbing onto the podium really strongly, sometimes short of breath. I mean, he's had plenty of those moments even before he was officially, you know, diagnosed with COVID. So that was just sort of his baseline functioning anyway. And so when you add on this virus, and again, yes, he's on steroids. Yes, that is sort of artificially making him feel better at this point. There is going to be an other side of that. So do I think he's going to be able to stand on a stage in front of the American people and put on a performance? I just don't think he's going to be able to do that. I'm not even certain that he's going to be able to go out and have his rallies that he wants so bad.
Yeah. Does this help him or hurt him then?
I think it hurts him. I honestly think it hurts him because he looks so much more incompetent in light of the fact that he said it was a hoax, but he ultimately got it. And he is the first president since Reagan to be hospitalized. And that's very significant.
Yeah, but Reagan was shot. There's a difference.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Right? So, but again, I mean, you know, I have these tweets that go back for miles and miles and miles, and I was looking back to, you know, my tweets around the time of the inauguration, and I was saying that, you know, he wouldn't even admit to his own frailty, you know, in terms of his cognition. He's certainly not been honest about his weight. Anything that's related to his health, he has suppressed and denied.
Right, but you know, there's part of me that understands that. I mean, if you're the leader of the free world, I mean, if you're the president, you don't want people to know your weaknesses. You want to project strength. So when I saw him get out of the helicopter and walk up the stairs, I'm like, you know, I get that because I would have done the same thing. I probably wouldn't have ripped the mask off in an act of defiance. I'd have waved and gone in. But you know, I get the wanting to project strength. I get the idea that you want to go out and you know, drive around in the crowd and you just don't do it. But I do get it that you want to project that kind of outward strength, not just for your supporters, but for the rest of the world. I kind of get that.
Oh, I get that part. But I think what he's ultimately projecting is stupidity.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and what I was going to say about those old tweets was that I actually tweeted that the juxtaposition of him versus President Obama, who most of us don't even really remember it anymore, but he was a smoker, you know, for most of his adult life. And one of the first things he did when he became president was to quit smoking. That was very important to him because he wanted to be our president for 8 years if he had the opportunity. And he didn't want it to be cut short by something like lung cancer or COPD or some other consequence of him smoking for as long as he had smoked.
Right. Or the image of him smoking.
Exactly. But again, that's one of the hardest things physically. I mean, quitting cigarettes is actually harder to quit than like cocaine, right? It's one of the most addictive drugs on the planet. So that was something he was very, you know, upfront about, and he wanted to keep himself in office to protect the nation and, like you said, project strength. The part of this issue with Trump is that he didn't even keep his own self safe. It wasn't enough of a priority for him to think, hey, given everything I know about my own status, I may not be honest about it to other people, but I need to do this so that I can stay safe and I can remain alive. I mean, I think that's just what speaks to the level of narcissism, the level of delusion, the grandiosity that he could beat this thing no matter what.
Yeah, but that's that idea. I run into that every day with people who, you know, are the anti-mask crowd, or my Republican friends who, you know, this is just like the flu. We know it is. It's not a big deal. We know people who have gotten through it. It will be fine.
Yeah.
And that's for me the biggest disservice I think he's doing at this point is sending that message,
Yeah.
especially with with his campaign running around saying he now understands it better than Joe Biden does because he's got the experience and he can empathize. And when I heard Trump's name with the word empathize in the same sentence, my head about exploded.
I mean, they have a spin machine in there. I mean,
Second to none.
This is how they turn a negative into a positive in their eyes. What else do they have left? What else can you make of it in this situation? This dude denied and denied and denied, and he ended up getting it so bad that he had to be hospitalized.
Yeah, like I said at the right when it came out, I wish him recovery. I think Chris Rock said a long recovery. I don't know that I disagree with that. But my view, I want him healthy enough to be tried, convicted, and jailed. But just my thoughts. I did want to get your thoughts on the upcoming debate. I'm looking forward to this one more than any of the other ones between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. Just some thoughts.
I think that my first thought is it really still bothers me that they're planning to do this in person. And that they're not doing it over Zoom. I don't think Pence can be trusted in terms of, the coronavirus.
Yeah. So you don't think the plexiglass? Because I had thought, you remember, you're probably not old enough to remember, but back in the old days, they used to have these game show booths where they were like silent.
Yeah.
You would go into the game show booth and people would talk about you or whatever. I've said game show booths. It's what we should do with certainly with Trump. To keep him quiet, you can turn him on and off and light it up. You can even have lights to tell them when they can talk and when they can't. But I like the idea of game show booths. I don't like the Zoom idea because teleprompters and people holding up cards.
It would probably look weird
and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think no matter what the format is, I think that Kamala probably more than anything is going to still have her eyes laser focused on Trump. And ultimately, Pence will get dragged for, basically being his, Stepford wife. That he's basically co-signed and rubber stamped all of the atrocity for Trump. And I think it's still going to ultimately be an indictment of Trump. So that's what I'm looking forward to is her prosecuting the case. That's what she's so good at.
No, she is terrific at that.
Yeah.
What I'm also curious at is your thoughts on the other side of it. You can already see the spin machine, no matter what she does, going to be the pit bull, the angry black woman. We know that's the messaging coming out of it, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they're already spinning up, making fun of her name, and this, that, and the other. I think that's all they can say. That's all they can do. They're just going to try to get at people's base instincts and their base bigotry to try to impugn everything she says. But for the people that know and love Kamala, they know she's got a job to do. She's going to show up and do it. And I think ultimately she's Joe Biden's greatest spokesperson. So the more we see of her in sound bites and for the next couple of, the next week going into the next debate that who knows if it's going to happen between Trump and Joe Biden, I think that that's going to help shift the news cycle away from all of the craziness that we've been talking about for the last week. I hope she talks about the tax returns, and I hope she really nails them on that because that was an issue that certainly got sidestepped in light of Trump, getting this virus.
Yeah, I mean, because those of us who our immediate, reaction was, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Because it did. It changed. It completely, again, changed the news cycle, which Trump is so good at doing. Say what you want about the guy. He is a master at changing the news cycle and making it all about him.
Yeah, and I think that her job has consistently been throughout this campaign to refocus on what the actual issue is. So I do think that she's going to bring a lot of that stuff back into the focus, and it's going to serve as a reminder, like, hey, guys, we still have a job to do. Let's get serious, especially while all these new states are starting to vote in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, did you happen to see the Saturday Night Live skit?
No, I did not.
Well, there went that. I thought Maya Rudolph, I think her name is.
Yeah.
I think did an excellent job, and really caught the ire of the right wing blatherheads this morning.
Oh, good. Well, then I'll have to check it out.
Because they mocked the whole thing and said, the Saturday Night Live just doesn't, they don't do satire anymore. They're setting an agenda, and
That's what they've always done.
It was quite comical. Quite comical.
Well, it worked then.
Yeah, it was good. You should check it out.
I will.
But as always, Jane, I appreciate the time.
You too. Have a great week.
Good stuff. Our good friend Propane Jane. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
So would I.
Green News Report special coverage. A surprise discussion about climate change at the first 2020 presidential debate in Cleveland, Ohio.
All of those surprises and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Here's the
talking
deal.
about the Green New Deal.
That
Dumbest,
is not,
most ridiculous,
that is not,
where airplanes are out of business, where two-car systems are out, where they
Not
want
true.
to take out the cows.
No, they don't want to take out the cows. This is your Green News Report.
And it's not $2 billion or $20 billion, as you said. It's $100 trillion.
No, it is not. You are so full of shit. Okay, Desi Doyen. It was a surprise. We were told what the topics would be for the first presidential debate. Climate change was not on Chris Wallace's list. But sure enough, it was a nice, long segment on climate change.
Yeah, with a record hurricane season and a record deadly wildfire season in the West, costing the U.S. hundreds of billions of dollars in economic losses in just the last month alone. Yeah, climate hawks had criticized debate moderator Chris Wallace for omitting that climate crisis from his official list of topics.
And apparently Chris Wallace heard the complaints.
Apparently he did. He surprised everyone with an 11-minute discussion on climate change. I believe it was the longest and most substantive on climate ever in a general election presidential debate.
I believe you are correct.
That's not saying much, of course, but it was still pretty good. But before we turn to the debate, first, keep in mind that climate scientists say humans are responsible for all of the global warming observed since the 1950s. And they say that swift, sustained action will be required over the next 10 years and beyond if we are to have a chance at avoiding the worst impacts of man-made climate change. Wallace began by noting the record wildfires in the West, Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, and his rollbacks of President Obama's environmental and climate regulations. Trump conflated climate change with air and water pollution, raising the question of whether he even understands what man-made climate change is. And of course, he took credit for Obama's emissions-cutting policies.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally.
He doesn't know the difference between pollution and carbon emissions, does he?
On the third attempt, Trump finally answered.
Do you believe that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of this
I think
planet?
a lot of things do, but I think to an extent, yes. But I also think we have to do better management of our forests.
To an extent, yes. He sort of agrees, yes. But then we have to take care of our forests somehow. That's climate change?
Which it is driven by climate change, but no.
It doesn't cause climate change.
Wallace pressed on.
But, sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Which, of course, is false. Renewable energy is now on par with or cheaper than fossil fuels for electricity, and Trump's rollbacks of mileage and emission standards for cars will actually result in more traffic deaths, not fewer, as Trump falsely claimed. Wallace then turned to Vice President Joe Biden. He gave a great summary of Biden's comprehensive climate policies, but unfortunately couched it in conservative false framing of climate action versus the economy.
You propose $2 trillion in green jobs. You talk about new limits, not abolishing, but new limits on fracking, ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. It includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy-efficient homes. So the question becomes, I think some people who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
What it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs. It's going to make the economy much safer. Look how much we're paying now to deal with the hurricanes. We spend billions of dollars now. Billions of dollars on floods, hurricanes, rising seas because of global warming. There's so many things that we can do now to create thousands and thousands of jobs. Not only not costing people jobs, creating jobs.
Biden did miss an opportunity to explain his plans for a just transition for fossil fuel industry workers and low-income households in transitioning to a clean economy. Polls show that the vast majority of voters want climate action. And for the first time in a general election presidential debate, Americans finally got to hear a little of what the candidates will do or not do about the climate crisis.
It was an insane debate, but who would have thunk with Donald Trump in a debate and Chris Wallace of Fox News hosting that we'd have an actual discussion about our climate crisis, no matter how insane that discussion actually was. For much more on this and all of the stories we couldn't cover today because of it, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in a document handed over to federal court by the Postal Service, evidently first-class mail delivery, the on-time part of it plummets. They show that on-time delivery for the week of September 19th sank to 84.2%, more than 4.5% decline. And I got to tell you, I look at, the fact that it was at, 88, almost 90%. That's pretty damn good when you think about the volume of mail that our Postal Service deals with every day. And for all those people who say, the post office can't do anything, I think they do a pretty damn good job. I really do, with the volume that they get. And the fact that you've got now somebody leading it who's doing everything in their power to make it worse and slow things down, a 4.5% decline is bad. Could have been much, much worse. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Our president is back in the White House after being discharged from Walter Reed. I've asked our good friend, former Congressman Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So, the president's back in the White House.
Yes.
Had the little joyride over the weekend. Did the mask ripoff today. Lots of fun news.
Well, my job is to analyze news, and I'm just going to say yes. After 44 years in politics, I'm just going to say yes.
Yep. What more can you say? I mean, this is one of those moments where, I think David Gergen said it best. We're in the hands of a madman.
Rick, when I called it the parade. I'm sitting there thinking, of course, 1,000 things. Number one, if we were in the hospital, you and I, and we said, well, we want to just take a stroll around in a car. And I know he's the president, I understand that, but there is no physician that could stand there, including his own, because I'm serious about this part. His own physician could not have said, yes, okay. He had to have technically objected, or, frankly, he should probably lose his license.
Yep.
I mean, he had to have objected. For the president to do that, I'm running through my mind, what benefit was it of the president to do that? There was no political benefit. I mean, is he supposed to show that how strong he is? You don't walk out of a hospital and take a ride around in a car and go back in.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Dear leader needs his parade. I mean,
I know.
My first thought is, this is what dictators do. They need to be around their adoring crowds, and this was his fix.
But it was just it made zero sense. I was seriously stunned. I thought it was something from The Onion, you know, when I or the Babylon Bee when I first saw it. I don't get it. And then I watched twice tonight his talk. I think it was from the portico of the White House, it looked like. And he said, this is what leaders are supposed to do. And it was subject for interpretation. Are they supposed to get the virus and then, you know, walk around? I don't get it.
No, I didn't get much of his ramblings. The going to school thing, I didn't, and now he gets it after 210,000 people are dead and millions of people infected, and you know the economy in shambles. Now he finally gets it. Right now he gets it.
I think this is one of these things where so much has spun out of control. Look, this election was close, and it really was. And I'm not saying it's done by any stretch of imagination, but there is no question it has unraveled. Anybody that has ever run for office, I've run 12 different times, and anybody that's ever run for office knows you can work all year long, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, if you start to unravel, you unravel. And he's got the press secretary, the campaign manager, the previous campaign manager had a meltdown and, you know, was arrested.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things are going down at one time. He gets the COVID, he goes in the hospital, and I thought to myself, you know, if he handles this correctly, and, you know, stays presidential and he is ill and he handles it correctly, politically this is going to be a win. And he just somehow managed to take it and make you shake your head and say, what did I just see?
Yeah, but
it's juvenile.
No, it is, but you know, I very rarely listen to right-wing radio, but I spent some time today listening. And the message that they're sending out is this is a sign of strength. This is him, you know, stepping forward and leading on the issue. You know, he now has experience with it, and he now is, you know, he's going to fight through it. You know, the Matt Gaetz, you know, don't worry about Donald Trump, worry about COVID. You know, that kind of, you know, chest thumping, that kind of rhetoric that, you know, we're tougher than this and we'll take it out. That really was, you know, what they were hammering on today.
Well, the thing is, he could have risen to the occasion, still continued to work, sent a message out there that, you know, you have to take this serious.
Right.
The message he gave tonight was disturbing in this aspect, at least, number one, disturbing. And that is when he says, you know, don't succumb to this, don't be afraid of this. I'm paraphrasing here. If you have a health condition, or you're, you know, 70 or 80 or 90 years old, and you have some type of health condition, and you get COVID, it's not so easy to just sit there and say, well, don't be afraid of it. Of course you better be fearful of it and cautious about it. So I just couldn't even follow the message tonight.
You know, I look at, you know, today was really a very bizarre day. I mean, the president woke up and immediately in all caps started yelling at us. You know, my first question, did the hydroxychloroquine make him deaf? Because, you know, every tweet that was out was, you know, in caps and just, you know, one, you know, couple words, Space Force. Okay. He literally wrote Space Force vote. And you go, is there something seriously wrong with this guy? And how can you let him out of the hospital when he's clearly not all there? It's
just unraveling. It really is. It's unraveling.
So it's your view then you think that this is he's handled this the wrong way, and this could be the other direction? Because look, we're about at the point where those Access Hollywood tapes came out, and everyone said back then, "Oh, this is the end. You know, he's done. You know, because you know, who could possibly not be angry at grab her by the you know what." This is a weird candidate. This is a weird kind of scenario. I mean, is there any way that this benefits him?
No, this does not benefit him. I mean, they could spin it any way they want. It was handled incorrectly. Here's the other thing too. I want to point this out because this is flabbergasting. I mean, in the sense of the White House, you have his position, which when I watched the press conference this weekend, I knew what the physician was doing. You knew, everybody knew. He said he was not on oxygen today. Well, was he on oxygen? He's not on oxygen today. You know, now there are HIPAA laws. So let me throw this out here. It's very possible the president or, you know, whoever was his top guy there turned to the physician and said, do not say he's on oxygen. There's HIPAA laws.
Right.
So the physician can't say. You know, if the patient tells him don't say this, then the physician can't say that because he wouldn't say that. So what happens? The chief of staff, Meadows, at the White House uses the anonymous leak syndrome, whatever that is, and says, oh, yeah, the president was on oxygen. How does this happen? How does that happen? So I'm looking at all of this. There is nothing positive that came out of this. It could have been very positive. Now, is this all done? No, because, you know, you've seen elections, especially when it comes to Trump. It's a strange situation, and there are electoral states. But I would say that they have damaged themselves pretty darn good in the last 5 days.
Yeah. Are you expecting Meadows to get fired anytime soon?
I would assume so. Now, it's close to the election, so it's very possible they won't. But he technically shouldn't be allowed to see or do anything. He should just, you know, sit in his office and read. For the next 3 weeks.
Send him to the rubber room.
Right. Put him in the office. He reads. Don't let him touch anything, and don't fire him, and promise him a bonus, and let him just sit there and read and eat all day.
Now, the other conspiracy that I came across was this is the Democrats did this. It's only Republicans who are being diagnosed with COVID, and they're doing it specifically to derail the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. I find that really hard to even accept on the basic premise of, you know, these people have been irresponsible the entire time, you know, and I don't think Democrats could ever plan something like that possibly.
No, they couldn't. I mean, look, it might start happening to Democrats. I mean, you never know. Yeah. Something could happen, but they would have to be in a scenario where they're sitting around like the Republicans did with the White House garden
the Rose
gathering.
Garden,
yeah, they would have to be sitting around with masks off, and then one of them has it, and then that could happen. But no, I can't give the Democrats enough credit that they were ingenious to. Hey, Senator, come here. Now walk over there and spread it around everybody.
But is it possible now that this has happened? Is it possible now that this potentially could derail the confirmation? Wouldn't it be ironic that the spreader event happened at her nomination that ends up derailing her confirmation?
Well, yes. I mean, there are a lot of problems. If Chuck Schumer wants to get into a really good fight club right now, he could do it because he could go along with not going on the break. And they could keep them in D.C., and then Mitch needs, a good portion of his people back. And then, of course, there's 3 that really can't come back effectively. And so, yes, there could be problems. Now, I think one way or the other, after the election, I don't care if there's 9 of them sick, they're gonna do something.
Yeah, I think Ron Johnson said
right now it can derail it. Yes. Yeah,
Ron Johnson said he put on a moon suit or something, crawl over hot coals and in a lava pit to be able to vote for her.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to happen one way or another. But I think it's interesting that there was the push. Do you think Schumer will do it? I mean, this is one of those moments where you go, I don't think anyone should be leaving D.C. for any reason until a stimulus bill is passed to help people who are struggling and help people stay in their homes. But that's just me.
I think Schumer should do it. If I was in his shoes, I would do it. But something tells me he's not going to do it. I would think he really should do it. I don't think he will.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Everyone keeps saying, the Democrats, when they get power, they're going to expand the court. They're going to do all these things. No, they're not.
If they are really super, super serious right now about trying to, agitate over this court, pick that Trump has made, there are definitely maneuvers that they could do. They have the power to potentially block McConnell to maintain his total control of the Senate, hearings and proceedings if they wanted to do it. I just don't think they will, because I don't think they want to take that, quote, political gamble that they're disrupting the system, quote unquote, and I think they're fearful of it. But honestly, it would be a pretty good, tough thing to do if they did do it.
It would make me stand up and go, finally, a Democrat who's willing to ball up his little digits and throw a couple of punches in there.
Because the Republicans would do it.
Absolutely, without question.
They would have done it.
Yeah, without question. Finally, the big debate on Wednesday. We're not going to be doing a show Wednesday. We will be, we'll be doing as we did for the last debate. After the debates, we will have a live roundtable. Got some really good folks this week. Thoughts on the big debate coming up?
Yes. Well, obviously they're going to be 12 feet apart and 3 inches behind plexiglass. So they're doubling the distance away. They're taking no problems, to make sure it's all safe. I think it's going to be very fascinating, and I think that, obviously Senator Harris is going to do quite well. Pence has been around a long time. He's no dummy. He knows things. He was a congressman. I served with him. He was the governor. But her style and ability, this is a night for her to shine.
Right.
I believe. I think she'll be on, and I believe she's going to do very, very well.
How aggressive do you think she's going to be? Does she try the Tim Kaine thing, or how do you see it?
I think she'll handle herself way far better. She'll be, she's not going to let obviously him get a jump on her, and in any way shove her around. But I don't think she's going to be. I should say this, I guess. I don't think she's going to be as aggressive as she was with Joe Biden at one point in time, during the one debate there a long time ago. Yeah. But I think she's going to hit some punches. Absolutely.
She's going to have to.
Yeah, she has to. She can't just stand there and be, all nice. I don't think she's going to be like wild with him, but I think she's going to definitely be aggressive and throw some punches, and she knows how to do it.
Yeah.
She really does.
Less than a month to go. Every day gets that much more important. And Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much, my good friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff as always. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was a day known in Hollywood as Black Friday. After World War II, the movie industry began to rake in profits. But they did not pass those profits along to their employees. 10,000 members of the Conference of Studio Unions were on strike. They were part of the Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners. They were also in a jurisdictional battle with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, or IATSE, over who should represent stage decorators. The strike wore on for half a year. The studios had more than 100 films backlogged and were able to wait out the strikers. But as the strike continued and the studios remained silent, pressure mounted. Despite the tensions between the two unions, thousands of IATSE members refused to cross the picket lines. On Black Friday, the strikers decided to concentrate their efforts at the Warner Brothers Studios gate. 300 picketers gathered to hold the line. Scabs, hired by Warner Brothers, tried to drive through the workers' picket lines to the studio. Variety accounted what happened next, writing, quote, "Strikers deployed from their barricades, halted non-strikers, and rolled 3 automobiles on their sides. By noon, reinforcements arrived from both sides. Firemen were called in to turn their hoses on the striking workers. Warner Brothers security deployed tear gas. Common for the time, accusations were hurled that the Conference of Studio Union strikers were communists. As a result of the strike, the Conference of Studio Union union's employees were assigned to other jobs in the studios. When they refused, they were locked out. The union never recovered. The violence at the Warner Brothers Studios gate also helped to fuel the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act through Congress, which eroded union protections. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news yesterday and then confirmed this morning. Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey not going to seek re-election in 2022. Also not considering running for governor. I'll tell you, I am thrilled with that because he's one of the few Republicans in this state that has run statewide, that's won a statewide election. There aren't any other than some judges now. So having Toomey out of the picture with the huge amount of money that he can bring in gives me some hope, because I've said for a while now, 2022, if Joe Biden wins, and I'm hoping I'm feeling a little more confident by the day that that's possible. 2022, you're obviously going to get the blowback, which means the midterm elections always go the direction of the party, the minority party, which means a Republican potentially in the governor's mansion here in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has this weird little history of not electing after 2 terms, not electing a person from the same party. That there's a flip back and forth. So historically, if history remains, a Republican will win in 2022 as governor. And as I've said, I'm taking bets on if Pennsylvania can beat Kentucky to ram through their no rights at work legislation on first thing on a Saturday, first opportunity they get. And I assume they will. But it's going to open up an interesting moment, because there really isn't a deep bench for statewide candidates on the Republican side here in this state. I think Josh Shapiro, who is running for Attorney General now, I think he's probably the guy who's at the front of the pack. Potentially Bob Casey, the current senator, the senior senator here, potentially. I don't know, but there are a lot of names. Guy who's running for Congress in my congressional district, who I'm hoping is my congressman next year. Eugene De Pasquale, he is someone who's run statewide. There's an opportunity for if to break that history, because there are a lot of decent Democrats who have run statewide campaigns, and please make that happen. But the fact that Toomey is out makes me think one of a couple of things. One, there's a huge payday for him on the other side, going back to the private sector now that he's delivered so much for corporate America. He's only 58. So he's got a couple more work years left in him, to cash in heavily for all the favors he's done. And I guess that's my only thought. I don't see him as a guy with, live boys or dead hookers. I just don't. I see him a guy, someone who cashes in off of corporate America, and maybe that's it. But it's going to be interesting to watch the Republicans in my state jockey for that lead title. Is it going to be Scott Wagner again with his golf spikes? Probably not. But you're going to have to get his blessing, especially in the center of the state. Is it going to be some of the the crazies who've been jockeying here in the state senators? Mike Turzai coming out of retirement. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But no matter who it is, I guarantee you, attacking workers and their rights is going to be front and foremost on their agenda. It will be legislation 1. Making Pennsylvania a right-to-work state will be the Republicans' number 1 issue. And for me, in talking to my labor friends, the reality is for the last 25, 30 years, the no rights at work people have been in this state pushing their agenda, and heavily funded. And all those years when they were mocked because there was no way Pennsylvania was ever going to become a right-to-work state, they're so close because they've done such an amazing job of convincing working people that unions are bad, that unions aren't helpful. And the sad thing is, once they go away, getting them back is really hard. You want to solve inequality? You want to solve a lot of our problems? I say we bring back strong labor unions, not destroy them. So when you go to the polls and you vote, I think that should be part of the calculus on who you vote for. Just that simple for me. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. As I said, Wednesday we will be off to watch the debates. Right after the debates, though, we're going to have a live panel discussion you're not going to want to miss. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.